There's a moment in every conversation where you either gain respect or lose it forever, and most people miss it. But today, I'll give you just one sentence, just one, that, if spoken with clarity and confidence, will make people stop, listen, and respect you instantly. Not later. Not after years of proving yourself. Instantly. Most people think respect is something you earn slowly over time, through accomplishments, status, or charisma. And sure, those things help. But real, lasting respect, especially the kind that shows up instantly, starts somewhere else. It starts with your boundaries. And I don't mean just knowing them. I mean speaking them, living them, owning them. The sentence that changes everything is this: I respect myself too much to let this continue. Now pause and think about that, because the moment you say that, not just to someone else but to yourself, you set a line. You create a space where dignity lives. You're not begging someone to treat you better. You're not yelling, arguing, or defending yourself endlessly. You're simply stating a fact, and facts are powerful. See, when you make it clear that you respect yourself, people take notice. Why? Because so many don't. So many people fold to pressure, bite their tongue, or stay silent just to keep the peace. When peace doesn't even exist in that space, they tolerate behavior that chips away at their confidence, their energy, their spirit. All in the name of being liked, accepted, or just not making waves. But when you say, I respect myself too much to let this continue, you stop that cycle. You show the world, without shouting, that your dignity has a boundary. Let me tell you what happens next. People may pause, they may push back. Some will even test that line. But the right people, the ones who are capable of growth and empathy, will adjust. They'll feel the power in your words and how calmly they're delivered. Because that's the key. This sentence doesn't come from a place of anger. It comes from self-worth. It's not about punishing someone. It's about protecting your peace. When someone talks over you, dismisses you, criticizes you in a way that cuts too deep, not because they're helping, but because they're trying to control, you don't need a dramatic confrontation. You just need a sentence that draws the line without burning the bridge. And what makes that sentence so powerful is it doesn't make the other person the villain. It keeps the focus on you, your standard, your value, your boundary. You're not saying, you're a terrible person, or you're always disrespecting me. You're simply saying, I won't be part of this dynamic anymore. That shows strength, it shows clarity, and it earns respect. Because here's the truth, people respect what you tolerate. If you let someone keep talking down to you, they'll keep doing it. If you stay silent when someone crosses a line, they'll think there's no line. But when you speak up, not with rage, not with fear, but with calm certainty, you shift the balance. You raise the bar. And here's what's even more important. This sentence doesn't just tell them something. It tells you something. It reminds you that your voice matters, that your needs are valid, that your self-worth isn't up for negotiation. That's a big shift. Because the more you practice that, respecting yourself enough to speak your truth, the less often you'll find yourself in situations where you need to say it. People start treating you differently. They show up with more care, more presence, more thoughtfulness. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence commands it. And that's the kind of respect that lasts. You don't need to say much. You just need to mean what you say. So the next time someone disrespects your time, your values, your peace, don't over-explain. Don't spiral. Just pause and say it, I respect myself too much to let this continue. Respect isn't always about being the loudest voice in the room. In fact, the opposite is often true. The people who command the most respect aren't yelling to be heard. They're calm, steady, in control. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't react emotionally to pressure or disrespect. That kind of presence instantly shifts the energy in the room. And it comes down to how you speak when things get tense. Because the moment you raise your voice, match someone's disrespect, or let your emotions take over, you've already handed them your power. But when you stay grounded, when you speak calmly, even when someone's trying to provoke you, you flip the dynamic completely. Here's the sentence I use when things start going sideways. I hear you, but I will not tolerate being spoken to this way. Simple, clear, calm. You're not threatening anyone. You're not escalating the situation. You're just setting a standard, one that doesn't need volume to be powerful. What you're doing in that moment is reminding the other person that their behavior doesn't control your reaction. That no matter how loud or aggressive they get, you're not going to meet them at that level. And that's powerful. It tells people you have emotional discipline, that you're not easily shaken, that you value your peace more than you value being right in the moment. And believe me, that earns more respect than any clever comeback or shouting match ever could. I know what some people think. If I don't stand up for myself aggressively, won't they walk all over me? No, not if your calm comes with boundaries. Not if your tone is firm, your message clear, and your energy steady. Because people listen differently when you don't sound like everyone else. When everyone else is yelling, and you're composed, you stand out. You shift the tone of the conversation without even trying. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone win an argument by getting louder? Probably not many. But how many times have you seen someone shut a situation down by staying calm and speaking with authority? Probably more than you realize. The calm voice in the chaos always wins long term. And this sentence, I hear you, but I will not tolerate being spoken to this way, doesn't just calm the storm, it changes the conversation entirely. It makes the other person check themselves. Because you're showing them, without aggression, that you're not here to be disrespected. And if they keep pushing, if they don't adjust, you don't need to argue. You don't need to prove anything. You just walk away. That's where the real power is. See, people confuse calm with weakness. But real calm, that's strength that doesn't need to prove itself. That's power that doesn't come from controlling others, but from controlling yourself. And when you can hold on to that calm, especially when you're being tested, people start to respect you in a different way. They don't just hear what you say, they feel it. They know you're not afraid of confrontation, but you won't be dragged into conflict. They know you're confident not to react, and that makes them think twice before stepping out of line again. That's why tone matters. That's why delivery matters. Because how you say something is just as important, sometimes more important, than what you say. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be harsh to be strong. You just have to be consistent in how you carry yourself. So when the moment comes, and it will, when someone crosses a line, talks to you like your voice doesn't matter, tries to pull you into an argument you don't need to be in, take a breath, stay grounded, and say this: I hear you, but I will not tolerate being spoken to this way. There's a big difference between ego and self-worth. A lot of people mix those two up, and that's where things fall apart. Ego shouts, demands, and tries to impress. It needs constant validation. But self-worth. Self-worth doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. And when you speak from that place, people feel it, and they respect it. The sentence that cuts right through all the noise is this: I value respect over approval. Let that sink in. Most of us are trained, conditioned, sometimes even pressured to chase approval our entire lives. Approval from parents, approval from teachers, approval from bosses, friends, social media. We want to be liked, accepted, praised. And in the process, we learn to say what people want to hear instead of what we actually believe. But here's the thing. The more you chase approval, the more you give away your own voice. You start agreeing just to avoid conflict. You laugh at things you don't think are funny. You stay silent when something doesn't sit right with you. All because you're afraid that if you speak up, someone won't like it. But the moment you say, I value respect over approval, everything shifts. That one sentence declares to the world and to yourself that you won't trade your integrity for someone else's comfort. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to be you, fully and honestly. And that kind of clarity demands respect. Think about the people you admire. The ones who walk into a room and instantly have presence. Are they chasing attention? Are they trying to get everyone to like them? No. They're grounded. They know who they are. They say what they mean, and that's exactly why people respect them. When you speak from self-worth, it changes the entire tone of your conversations. You don't need to dominate or impress. You're not trying to win anyone over. You're just speaking your truth with honesty and calm. You might say no without explaining yourself. You might disagree without softening your voice to make others comfortable. You might offer a different opinion, not because you want to stand out, but because it's what you genuinely believe. And that makes people stop and pay attention. Because they can sense it. This person doesn't need approval to feel worthy. And when you stop needing approval, you stop being manipulated by it. People may not always like what you say, but they'll respect how you say it. That's the key. Respect and approval aren't always the same thing. Sometimes people will respect you more because you didn't try to please them. Because you said the uncomfortable truth, because you chose honesty over harmony. It's not about being rude or cold. It's about being real. There's something incredibly powerful about someone who's not afraid to disappoint others in order to stay true to themselves. Someone who knows that short-term discomfort is worth long-term self-respect. You stop living in fear of rejection. You stop watering yourself down, and you start standing in your full truth, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. You know what happens then? The right people, those who are drawn to honesty, authenticity, and strength, start showing up in your life. They hear you, they see you, and they trust you, because your words carry weight when they're rooted in self-respect. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to dominate the conversation. You just need to stand in your truth and let go of the need to be liked. That's what makes people respect you instantly. Not charm, not approval seeking, but a quiet, steady commitment to yourself. So the next time you're tempted to soften your message or to agree just to avoid being the odd one out, pause, breathe, and remind yourself of this simple truth: I value respect over approval. Most people think that the way to gain respect is by saying more words, more explanations, more energy, more intensity. But in truth, the most respected people don't speak to fill the silence. They speak to create it. They know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause. And when the moment calls for it, I use a sentence that resets the entire tone of a conversation. I say, let's take a moment and revisit that with respect. Now notice what's happening there. I'm not calling someone out aggressively. I'm not insulting them or escalating the situation. I'm redirecting. I'm creating space, a pause, not just for me but for them. And in that pause, everything can shift. Because respect isn't just about the words we choose. It's about the energy behind them. And when someone comes at you with anger, sarcasm, or disrespect, it's easy to feel that pressure rise in your chest, the need to respond quickly, defend yourself, argue, or match their tone. But when you do that, you're not leading the moment anymore. You're reacting to it, pausing. That deliberate moment of silence is a reset button. It tells the other person, I'm not here to compete. I'm here to communicate. And if this conversation isn't grounded in respect, I'm not interested. That's a whole different level of presence. The thing is, silence makes people uncomfortable. We're not used to it. Especially in conflict, silence feels like weakness. But actually, it's strength. Because when you're not in a hurry to respond, when you're not scrambling to defend yourself, when you pause, people listen. They lean in. They wonder what you're about to say. That's power. And when you follow that silence with, let's take a moment and revisit that with respect, you've completely reframed the dynamic. You haven't made the other person wrong. You've made the standard clear. You've said, we can talk, but not like this. And when you set that tone with calm and confidence, people adjust. The beauty of that sentence is that it invites accountability without force. It invites reflection, because no one wants to be seen as disrespectful. So instead of calling them out and putting them on the defensive, you're giving them a chance to step back and correct course. It's leadership. It's emotional intelligence. And it earns respect not just because of what you're saying, but because of how you're choosing to say it. Now, here's the deeper truth. Most people miss the pause doesn't just help others hear you. It helps you hear yourself. It gives you space to check your own tone, to regulate your emotion, to decide who you want to be in that moment. Are you reacting out of ego, or are you responding from clarity? Because once you pause, once you allow that breath to come in, you can choose to speak from composure instead of chaos. That's what makes people stop and listen. You ever notice how some people can walk into a room, say just one sentence, and instantly shift the energy? It's not because they're louder. It's because they speak with weight. And weight doesn't come from volume. It comes from intentionality. The more intentional you are with your words, the fewer of them you need. The more grounded you are in your tone, the more influence you carry. So don't rush to fill silence. Use it. Command it. And when someone crosses a line, not just in what they say, but in how they say it, don't try to outtalk them. Don't race them to the next word. Just pause, hold that silence, and when you're ready, calmly say, let's take a moment and revisit that with respect. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say doesn't sound complicated or clever. It sounds simple, direct, almost obvious. But what makes it powerful is the clarity behind it, the confidence, the conviction. One sentence I've found that cuts through the noise and immediately shifts the tone is this: that's not okay with me. Now, it might not sound dramatic. It might not sound like some bold viral line that gets shouted across a room. But when spoken calmly, with intention, it does something really important. It puts you back in control of the conversation. What makes this sentence so effective is that it doesn't attack anyone. It doesn't label, accuse, or insult. It doesn't start an argument. It ends confusion. You're not telling the other person what they are. You're telling them where you stand, and that distinction matters. Because too often, when someone crosses a line, we go silent. We brush it off. We tell ourselves it's not worth the fight. Or worse, we doubt our own right to be bothered. We replay it later in our minds, thinking, did that really happen? Should I have said something? Yes, you should. But not with anger. Not with a list of all the ways they're wrong. You just need one clear sentence that brings the attention back to your boundary. That's not okay with me. And you don't have to shout it. In fact, it works better when you don't. Because that quiet firmness carries more weight than yelling ever could. It tells the other person, I don't need to raise my voice to stand my ground. This sentence is powerful because it doesn't leave room for debate. You're not asking for permission. You're not opening a negotiation. You're simply naming your boundary and doing it without apology. Think about it. When someone makes a sarcastic comment that hits a little too hard, when a joke turns into a jab, when someone pushes past what you've made clear is your limit, most people just laugh awkwardly or stay silent. But when you calmly say, that's not okay with me, you immediately create a shift. You introduce accountability into a moment that would have otherwise passed without any. You're not trying to control the other person. You're letting them know where you draw the line. And once that line is visible, they can't pretend they didn't know it was there. This is how you teach people how to treat you. Not with long speeches. Not with emotional outbursts. But with clear boundaries. With words that are rooted in self-respect. You'd be surprised how often people adjust when you speak this way. Not because they're afraid of you, but because clarity earns respect. And the ones who don't adjust, the ones who get defensive or dismissive, that tells you everything you need to know. When you calmly express a boundary and someone responds with irritation or mockery, what they're really saying is, your comfort isn't more important than mine. And that's your cue to step back, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. You don't have to explain your standards. You don't have to turn every moment into a debate. You just speak clearly and let the other person decide how they'll respond. And here's the best part. This kind of clarity frees you. It removes the stress of wondering whether someone crossed a line or whether you should say something. You just trust yourself. You trust your instincts. You trust your right to speak up, because that's what this sentence is really about. It's not about controlling the room. It's about anchoring yourself. It's about honoring your own sense of right and wrong. The more you use it, the more natural it becomes. You start to notice when your values are being tested. You start to feel that internal signal that says, this doesn't sit right with me. And instead of ignoring it, you answer it with calm and clarity. You say, that's not okay with me, and that changes everything. Most of the time, when someone disrespects us, our first instinct is to fire back, defend ourselves, prove a point. We want them to feel what we felt. But here's the thing. If you make someone feel attacked, they're not going to reflect. They're going to defend. And once someone's in defense mode, the conversation is no longer about understanding. It's about survival. That's when it turns into a battle, and nobody wins. But there's a better way to respond to disrespect. One that invites reflection instead of resistance. One that puts the responsibility back where it belongs, without aggression, without a lecture. The sentence I use is, would you feel respected if someone said that to you? That question changes everything. It shifts the focus away from you and places it squarely in their hands. It doesn't accuse, it invites. It doesn't insult, it inquires. And because it's a question, it bypasses defensiveness and triggers self-awareness. People don't like to be called disrespectful, but they're often unaware they're being that way in the first place. They're reacting from emotion, habit, or ego. So when you calmly ask, would you feel respected if someone said that to you? You're holding up a mirror, one they can't ignore. And notice the tone here. It's not angry. It's not sarcastic. It's not passive-aggressive. It's neutral. That's what makes it powerful. You're not telling them what they did wrong. You're inviting them to think for themselves. Most people will pause when they hear that question, because it makes them look at their behavior from a different angle. It takes them out of their position and asks them to stand in yours, even if just for a second. That second is where growth happens. That second is where respect begins. This is how you get someone to take ownership of their words or actions without making them feel cornered. And that's rare, because in most conversations, especially the tense ones, everyone's fighting to be right. Everyone's trying to protect their pride, but when you speak from self-respect, not ego, you create space for both truth and dignity to exist. And that's what earns respect. Not the volume of your voice, not how fast you can clap back, but your ability to stay calm and clear in a moment when most people lose themselves. It's not about letting people off the hook. It's about giving them a chance to correct themselves. And when you do that, when you respond with a question like this, instead of a reaction, you're leading, you're showing emotional maturity, strength, and control. Because truthfully, the most respected people aren't the ones who constantly demand respect. They're the ones who demonstrate it in how they handle conflict. You don't need to tear someone down to make a point. You don't need to attack someone's character to defend your own. All you need is one well-placed question that invites reflection without sacrificing your boundary. And here's the beautiful part. This sentence works not just in personal conversations, but in professional ones too. In meetings, in family discussions, in friendships. Because everyone understands that question. Everyone knows what it's like to feel disrespected. And when you ask them to see things through that lens, it hits different. It doesn't escalate the moment. It elevates it. When someone speaks to you with a sharp tone, makes a condescending remark, or crosses a line with their words, you don't need to match their energy. You pause. You look them in the eye. And you ask, would you feel respected if someone said that to you? Now you've just shifted the conversation from blame to awareness, from reaction to responsibility, from conflict to clarity. That's where real respect begins, not just for you, but for the other person too. Because in that moment, you're not just teaching them how to treat you. You're teaching them how to be better. And the best part, you did it without raising your voice, without lowering your standards, without becoming what they were. You stayed rooted in respect. So the next time someone steps out of line, don't rush to respond with anger. Pause. Then calmly ask the question that says everything you need it to. Would you feel respected if someone said that to you?